My ex-wife brought her son to my workplace demanding I become his father figure after I declined at a coffee shop. I never expected my Thursday afternoon to be interrupted by my ex-wife showing up at my workplace with her 10-year-old son, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. To understand how I, 46M, ended up in this situation, I need to explain some background. I married Gina, 45F, when we were both in our mid-20s. I was 26, she was 25. At the time, we were both uncertain about having children. We had those typical young couple conversations where we'd say things like maybe someday or we'll see where life takes us. The truth was, neither of us had strong feelings either way at that point. As the years went by, my career path became clearer. I worked in finance, and I developed a very specific life goal: early retirement. Ever since college, I had been fascinated with the idea of financial independence. I wanted to work hard in my 30s and 40s, save aggressively, and then potentially retire in my mid-50s to travel and pursue hobbies without the constraints of a traditional work schedule. The more I thought about this plan, the more I realized having children wouldn't align with it. Children are expensive. They require time, energy, and financial resources that would significantly delay or completely derail my retirement goals. This wasn't just about money, it was about the lifestyle I wanted. I started to feel strongly that parenthood wasn't for me. Meanwhile, Gina's perspective shifted in the opposite direction. About 7 years into our marriage, she began dropping hints about wanting kids. She would show me photos of her coworkers' babies. She would make comments about how cute our nieces and nephews were getting. Once, she even joked about a pregnancy scare that made my stomach drop. The final hint came when she gave me a book called The Joy of Fatherhood for my birthday, saying she thought I might find it interesting. After that book, I knew we needed to have a serious conversation. One evening, I asked her directly if she wanted to have children. She admitted that yes, over the years, her desire to start a family had grown stronger. She now definitely wanted children, at least 2, preferably 3. We talked for hours that night. I explained my position too, that I had thought about it carefully and realized I didn't want to be a father. The conversation was difficult but respectful. We both recognized we had developed fundamentally different visions for our future. A week later, after we'd both had time to process, I brought up the subject of divorce. I told Gina that I loved her, but I didn't want to be the reason she never experienced motherhood. We were still young enough, early 30s at that point, that she could find someone who shared her desire for a family. Similarly, I could find someone whose life goals aligned more closely with mine. Gina didn't take it well. She insisted we could work through this difference. She suggested compromises, maybe just 1 child instead of 3, or waiting a few more years. But I knew myself well enough to recognize that having a child I didn't fully want would lead to resentment on my part, while denying her the family she desired would cause resentment on hers. Despite my attempt to make the split amicable, the divorce process turned contentious. Gina fought it every step of the way, dragging out what could have been a straightforward separation into a nearly 2-year ordeal. Eventually, the divorce was finalized when we were in our mid-30s. After the divorce, I dated casually but didn't find anyone I connected with deeply until 4 years ago, when I met Diane, 44F. She shared my views on remaining child-free and financial independence. We got engaged last year and are planning our wedding for this fall. As for Gina, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she struggled with dating after our divorce. She never remarried, but about 5 years after our split, she had a son, who is now 10 years old. From what I gathered, the father was surprisingly young, maybe 20 or 21 at the time, and worked as an apprentice in a construction trade. They were briefly engaged, but he left town suddenly during Gina's pregnancy and hasn't been involved in the boy's life since. I had successfully maintained a distance from Gina's life for years. We live in the same metropolitan area but different suburbs, and our social circles barely overlap except for one complication. My sister Melissa, 42F, attends the same church as Gina. They're not close friends, but they see each other regularly at church functions. Last month, Gina reached out via text asking if we could meet for coffee to catch up. I mentioned this to Diane, who encouraged me to go. Diane thought it might be a good way to clear any lingering tension, especially since we occasionally hear about Gina through my sister. So I agreed to meet Gina at a cafe equidistant from our workplaces. The first 20 minutes were ordinary enough, surface-level updates about work, brief mentions of mutual acquaintances, that sort of thing. Then Gina steered the conversation toward her son, Nathan. She explained that Nathan was struggling without a male role model. His teachers had suggested he might benefit from a consistent masculine influence in his life. Then came the request, would I consider spending time with Nathan? Perhaps taking him fishing or to baseball games occasionally? I was stunned. I told Gina I was glad she had been able to have a child, but that parenthood, even in a part-time or mentorship capacity, wasn't something I was interested in. My stance hadn't changed. Instead of accepting my answer, Gina pressed harder. She suggested we could be a family again. When I mentioned Diane, Gina dismissed my relationship, saying it probably wouldn't last because deep down, you must miss what we had. I tried changing the subject several times, but Gina kept circling back to Nathan and her vision of us reuniting. Eventually, my patience wore thin. I stated firmly that I was happy with Diane and had no interest in rekindling anything with Gina. At this point, Gina began making disparaging remarks about Diane, calling her just a placeholder and suggesting she was only with me for financial security. I immediately stood up, paid for our coffees, and left without another word. Gina sent multiple text messages afterward, alternating between apologies and renewed attempts to persuade me. I eventually blocked her number. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Yesterday, Gina showed up at my office building with Nathan in tow. She waited in the lobby until my lunch break, then approached me as I was heading out. Nathan stood awkwardly beside her, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. Gina introduced me to Nathan as an old friend who might start spending time with you. The poor kid looked confused. Before I could react, Gina launched into a speech about how Nathan needed a father figure, and how I owed it to them after abandoning her years ago. Several of my coworkers were in the lobby, witnessing this uncomfortable scene. I kept my voice low and told Gina this was inappropriate and that she needed to leave. She refused, raising her voice and creating a scene. Security eventually approached and asked her to exit the building. That evening, I received calls from both my sister and my brother-in-law Kevin, 44M. They had already heard about the incident from Gina. While they agreed Gina's workplace ambush was inappropriate, they criticized my overall handling of the situation. They said I was being heartless by refusing to help Nathan, who was an innocent child caught in adult problems. My sister went so far as to say if I had given fatherhood a chance years ago, I probably would have changed my mind and loved it. I explained my position. I divorced Gina specifically because I didn't want children. I have no obligation to Nathan simply because his biological father abandoned his responsibilities. I barely know the boy. Moreover, getting involved now would give Gina false hope about reconciliation, which would be unfair to everyone involved. My sister countered that I owed Gina because I forced the divorce when she didn't want one. In her view, I created the situation that ultimately led to Nathan growing up without a father, so I have some responsibility to help fix it. I've discussed this with several friends and family members. My mother and several cousins side with my sister. My friends are split, though a small majority support my position. Diane is completely on my side and thinks my sister has been unreasonable for years. This morning I received an email from my company's HR department requesting a meeting tomorrow. I suspect Gina may have contacted them as well. I don't believe I'm wrong for maintaining boundaries, but the number of people suggesting otherwise has me questioning myself. The whole situation has become far more complicated than I ever imagined a simple coffee meeting could become. Update 1. The past 3 weeks have been a whirlwind of unwanted drama that I never saw coming. First, I should address what happened with the HR meeting I mentioned in my original post. The meeting was brief and actually quite reasonable. My manager and an HR representative simply wanted to check if I needed any support after the incident in the lobby. They assured me that they considered it a personal matter, but wanted to make sure I felt safe at work. I explained the situation, they documented it, and suggested I let security know if Gina showed up again. For about a week after posting, things were relatively quiet. Then last Sunday, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Gina, messaging from a new phone. She apologized for the scene at my workplace but then immediately pivoted to asking if I'd reconsider spending time with Nathan. I didn't respond and blocked the new number. 2 days later, my sister Melissa called. She invited me to a family barbecue at her house the following weekend. I accepted, thinking it would be nice to focus on normal family interactions after all the recent tension. Diane had a previously scheduled girls' weekend trip, so I planned to attend alone. When I arrived at Melissa's house that Saturday, I immediately noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway. Walking into the backyard, I froze. Sitting at one of the picnic tables was Gina, with Nathan playing with my niece and nephew on the swing set. Melissa approached me with a nervous smile and explained that she thought a casual, neutral setting might help break the ice between me and Nathan. She believed if I just spent some time around him, I'd see what a great kid he was and might reconsider my position. I pulled Melissa aside and told her I felt ambushed and manipulated. She became defensive, saying she was just trying to help everyone involved. When I said I was leaving, she accused me of being childish and causing unnecessary drama. Kevin, my brother-in-law, tried to mediate, suggesting I stay and just treat Gina as another guest, but I refused. As I was walking to my car, Gina followed me, Nathan trailing behind her. She loudly asked why I was leaving, making it impossible for me to exit without addressing them. Looking at Nathan's confused face, I felt terrible for him being put in this awkward position by adults who should know better. I simply said I had forgotten about another commitment and needed to leave, then got in my car and drove away. The fallout was immediate. My phone blew up with messages from family members who had witnessed the exchange. My mother called to say I had embarrassed everyone and hurt Nathan's feelings unnecessarily. Even relatives who weren't at the barbecue somehow heard about it and reached out to offer their unwanted opinions. 2 days after the barbecue incident, something far more concerning happened. Diane called me, clearly upset. Apparently, Gina had somehow obtained her work email and sent her a lengthy message claiming that during our coffee meeting, I had confessed to still having feelings for Gina and being unsure about our engagement. The email included several fabricated quotes from me and suggested Diane should do herself a favor and end our relationship before investing more time in it. Fortunately, Diane never doubted me for a second. She forwarded the email to me, and we discussed how to handle it. We decided that direct engagement would only encourage more contact, so Diane simply blocked Gina's email address and increased her social media privacy settings. Yesterday, things escalated further. Diane texted me in the middle of a workday, telling me that Melissa had shown up unannounced at her workplace. Melissa had brought both her kids and asked to speak with Diane privately. When Diane suggested they meet after work hours instead, Melissa refused to leave, causing enough disruption that Diane's supervisor noticed. Eventually, Diane took a reluctant break to speak with Melissa in the cafe across the street. According to Diane, Melissa spent 20 minutes trying to convince her that breaking up with me would be best for everyone. She claimed I was spiritually bound to Gina because of our marriage vows, regardless of the legal divorce, and that my inability to accept this connection was causing everyone pain. She even suggested that Diane's non-Christian lifestyle, Diane practices yoga and occasionally burns incense, was preventing me from seeing God's plan for my life. Diane, who remained remarkably composed, simply listened until Melissa ran out of steam, then returned to work without engaging with the accusations. When she told me about this later, we were both disturbed by the escalation and the increasingly religious framing of the situation. This morning, I received a text from Kevin, apologizing for Melissa's behavior. He explained that Gina had been spending more time with them recently, often bringing Nathan for playdates with their children. According to Kevin, Gina had been emotional during these visits, frequently crying about Nathan's need for a father figure and her regrets about our divorce. Kevin admitted that Melissa had become increasingly invested in the idea of fixing the situation, viewing it as almost a spiritual mission. The most revealing part of Kevin's message was the mention that Gina had recently started attending a women's Bible study group led by my mother. This explained the surprising alignment between my mother, sister, and ex-wife, as well as the religious undertones that had begun to color their arguments. Diane and I spent last evening discussing our options. We've decided to temporarily distance ourselves from my family until boundaries can be respected. I've drafted an email to send to my mother, sister, and brother-in-law explaining that while I value our family relationships, their recent actions have violated basic boundaries and trust. I've made it clear that any future attempts to manipulate situations, spread false information, or harass Diane will result in a more permanent separation. As for legal options, we're considering a cease and desist letter if the contact continues, particularly towards Diane at her workplace. For now, we're documenting everything and hoping a clear statement of boundaries will be sufficient. The support I've received here has been tremendously helpful during this chaotic time. It's reassuring to know I'm not being unreasonable in expecting basic respect for my life choices, even from family members who disagree with them. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and the situation has continued to develop in ways I never expected. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments on my previous posts. Your perspectives helped me stay grounded when it felt like everyone in my immediate circle was questioning my sanity. After sending the email I mentioned in my last update, setting clear boundaries with my family, I received varied responses. My mother replied with a brief message saying she would pray for my heart to soften. Melissa didn't respond directly but instead had Kevin call me. He suggested we meet in person to work things out as a family. I agreed to meet Kevin, just Kevin, at a local diner the following weekend. The conversation was tense but ultimately productive. Kevin confessed that while he had initially supported Melissa's efforts to reconnect me with Gina and Nathan, the situation had spiraled beyond what he considered reasonable. He revealed that Gina had been spending multiple evenings per week at their house, often staying for dinner and bringing Nathan for sleepovers with their kids. According to Kevin, Melissa and Gina had formed an intense friendship centered around the idea that I needed to return to my family. They had even begun discussing the possibility of Gina and Nathan moving into the rental property my sister and Kevin owned behind their house, which would make them next-door neighbors. This plan apparently developed without Kevin's full support, and he was uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. Kevin also mentioned something that caught me completely off guard. Gina had started talking about her rights as my true wife in the eyes of God. Despite our legal divorce years ago, she had convinced herself, with apparent encouragement from some church members, that our marriage remained spiritually binding unless one party had committed infidelity, which neither of us had. I thanked Kevin for his honesty and reiterated my position. I had no intention of rekindling a relationship with Gina or taking on a paternal role in Nathan's life. I emphasized that continuing to push this agenda would only damage my relationship with the entire family. 2 weeks after this meeting, Diane received a certified letter at our home. It was from Gina, handwritten on stationery with a church letterhead. The contents were disturbing. Gina formally forgave Diane for interfering in a covenant marriage and expressed her willingness to welcome her as a friend once Diane accepted the truth and stepped aside. The letter included several out-of-context biblical quotations about marriage and family obligations. Diane and I were sufficiently concerned by this escalation that we consulted an attorney. The lawyer advised that while the letter itself didn't constitute harassment under local laws, it established a pattern of behavior that could support future legal action if needed. We decided to have the lawyer send a formal cease and desist letter to Gina, copying my sister as well. The response was immediate and explosive. Melissa called me, more angry than I've ever heard her. She accused me of bringing lawyers into a family matter and threatening a struggling single mother. She claimed I had changed since meeting Diane and that I was now someone she barely recognized. During this call, Melissa inadvertently revealed something significant. She had been helping Gina compile a spiritual case for presentation to the church elders, documenting why our divorce was invalid in religious terms and why I should be encouraged to restore my family with Gina and Nathan. This explained the coordinated pressure I had been feeling from various church members, including distant relatives who had suddenly taken an interest in my personal life. I ended the call by telling Melissa I needed time away from this situation and would be stepping back from family interactions for the foreseeable future. I blocked her number immediately afterward, knowing it would only lead to more heated exchanges. Last week, things took an unexpected turn. I received an email from Kevin using his work account. He informed me that he and Melissa had been having serious marital problems for months, predating the current situation with Gina. He had moved out temporarily and was staying with his brother. While he didn't go into details, he mentioned that Melissa's increasing religious devotion and her fixation on my situation with Gina had been contributing factors to their conflict. Kevin also shared something that helped make sense of Gina's intense focus on reconnecting with me. Apparently, Nathan's biological father had recently returned to town. He had contacted Gina expressing interest in establishing a relationship with his son and potentially seeking formal custody arrangements. This development had triggered Gina's panic about securing a different father figure for Nathan, specifically me, before the biological father could complicate the situation. This information shed new light on the timing and intensity of Gina's efforts. What I had interpreted as merely unhealthy attachment to the past was actually a strategic attempt to create a new family narrative before Nathan's biological father could enter the picture. Yesterday, I received a text from my mother. It was brief but significant. She wrote that after prayer and reflection, she had come to believe that the church group had overstepped in their involvement with Gina's situation. She didn't apologize for her own role but suggested a family dinner next month to start fresh. I haven't responded yet, as I'm still processing everything. Diane and I have accelerated our wedding plans. Rather than the larger ceremony we had initially planned for the fall, we're now organizing a small destination wedding in June with just a few close friends. We've also begun house hunting in a city about 3 hours away where Diane has been offered a promising job opportunity. While the situation isn't fully resolved, I feel we're finally taking concrete steps to move forward with our lives despite the ongoing drama. I'll update again if there are significant developments, but for now, we're focused on building our future rather than managing the chaos of the past. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I felt I should provide a final closure to this chapter of my life for those who have followed my situation from the beginning. Shortly after my last post, Diane and I went through with our small destination wedding in June. We invited only our closest friends and my father, who lives across the country and has been divorced from my mother for decades. The ceremony was peaceful and exactly what we wanted, a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed the previous months. A week after returning from our wedding trip, we closed on a house in the city where Diane received her job offer. The move happened quickly, we hired professional movers and were settled in our new place by early July. I was able to transfer to a branch office of my company in the same city, which meant a lateral move career-wise but offered the fresh start we needed. Before leaving, I met with my mother for lunch. She had continued to reach out with increasingly conciliatory messages, and I decided it was worth one conversation before moving away. The meeting was tense but civil. My mother admitted that the church group had become overly involved in Gina's situation and acknowledged that some boundaries had been crossed. However, she stopped short of a full apology, maintaining that everyone had acted out of concern for Nathan and what they believed was best for all involved. I kept the conversation brief and factual, informing her of our completed wedding and imminent move. I provided my new address but made it clear that any future relationship would depend on respect for my marriage to Diane and the life choices we had made together. My mother seemed subdued by the finality of it all, perhaps finally realizing that the pressure tactics had only accelerated my departure from their lives rather than bringing me back into the fold. As for Melissa and Kevin, their marital issues continued. Kevin moved back home briefly in August, but according to mutual friends, he moved out again in September, this time more permanently. He has since filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. While I maintain occasional contact with Kevin via email, I haven't spoken directly with Melissa since before our move. The most significant development concerns Gina and Nathan. In August, I received an unexpected email from Gina. The tone was markedly different from her previous communications, formal, almost businesslike. She informed me that Nathan's biological father had followed through on seeking partial custody and that they were working with a mediator to establish a parenting plan. She acknowledged that her attempts to involve me in Nathan's life had been misguided and stated that she would not contact me again. This email was followed by a more formal communication from her attorney, requesting that I sign a statement confirming I had never acted in a paternal role toward Nathan and had no intention of claiming any parental rights. This was presumably to strengthen her position in the custody discussions with Nathan's biological father. I consulted my lawyer, who advised that signing such a document was reasonable and would create a clear legal boundary. I signed and returned it, which appears to have finally closed that chapter. Last month, I received a voicemail from my mother informing me that Gina and Nathan had moved to a neighboring state where Nathan's father had relocated for work. The custody arrangement apparently includes substantial time with his father, who has by all accounts stepped up to his parental responsibilities. My mother sounded resigned, almost deflated, as she shared this news. The situation that had caused so much drama had resolved itself without any of their interventions. Diane and I have settled well into our new community. The distance has provided perspective on the entire situation. While I occasionally feel a twinge of regret about the fractured family relationships, I recognize that the boundaries we established were necessary and healthy. Some relationships may heal with time, others may not. Either way, we've created space to live our lives according to our own values and choices. For those wondering about potential reconciliation with my sister or mother, I'm taking a wait-and-see approach. My mother has visited once, a brief and somewhat awkward weekend where she met some of our new friends and saw our home. The visit ended better than it began, with a tentative agreement to try again in the spring. Melissa has made no effort to contact me directly, though I occasionally receive updates about her through Kevin or mutual friends. As for Gina and Nathan, I wish them well but maintain the firm boundary of no contact. I hope Nathan develops a meaningful relationship with his biological father and that Gina finds peace with the reality of our past and present circumstances. Diane and I are focusing on building our life together. Our decision to remain child-free has allowed us to accelerate our financial goals. We're now on track for the early retirement I've worked toward for so long, with plans to start traveling extensively within the next 5 years. Looking back on this entire experience, I'm struck by how a decision I made years ago, to be honest about not wanting children and to end a marriage rather than compromise on such a fundamental life choice, continued to reverberate through my life in unexpected ways. While the journey hasn't been easy, I remain convinced it was the right path for everyone involved, even if that took years and considerable turmoil for others to accept. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice throughout this challenging period. Your perspectives helped me maintain clarity when it would have been easy to doubt myself.